Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
A geek for fun.
And Steve.
And today we're talking about a topic Steve came up with a second time. So what's that topic, Steve?
This has kind of been on my mind because I've been watching the new season of Peacemaker, and it's kind of the central premise of that. But it's also a thing that we've talked about in places here and there. But the whole idea is multiverses, and not like an alternate universe aspect of it, like Ultimate Universe or Absolute Universe or anything like that. Like specifically the idea that you're reading or watching or playing a story where the fact that there are multiple parallel universes coexisting is part of the narrative or part of the formula. So I was messaging Ian, or Ian actually messaged me asking about Peacemaker Season 2, and then we've been going back and forth on it. And we were just talking about how good it is and how well it utilizes the multiverse to tell a real character-driven dramatic story that actually takes into account what would this mean for a person existentially as they're experiencing it. And it's so smart and it's so human and it's so well done. And then as I'm watching it, I'm like, damn, I can't believe that Peacemaker Season 2 is a fucking HBO Max TV show. And then the goddamn Spider-Man multiverse movie is so bad compared to this. Or Deadpool and Wolverine is so bad compared to this. What is this doing that makes it so good? So I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk about how ever since Spider-Verse we've proliferated this idea of the multiverse, and how basically almost all the time it kind of sucks, with the very few exceptions of Peacemaker, Spider-Verse. Some people would say Everything Everywhere All at Once is the best multiverse story, which I don't love that movie, but there's an argument that it's certainly better than a lot of other multiverse stuff. But what does all that stuff do that's so good compared to No Way Home or Deadpool and Wolverine or any host of Loki, any other host of multiverse shenanigans that's been going on. Really, any Crisis on Infinite Earth, right? All of them are kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, because it's such a simple premise, and it can work so well when you either just don't think too hard about it and just tell a story for the fuck's sake, or you actually really try to engage with it. It's when you get lazy about it and don't think too hard, but to the point where it becomes stupid. Because, I think a great example of, it's not that deep, right? It's just another universe, but, tell me that Justice League Crisis on Two Earths isn't, one of the best of those animated movies. Not that
it's
that's
one
a
of my
super
favorites,
high bar,
yeah.
It's
really good.
really fucking good. And
it's
just,
really good.
Yeah, there's another universe where you're all evil and all the bad guys are good. It's oh, cool, let's go there and fuck shit up. That's pretty much the whole premise. And so it's just bare bones. It's just really simple. And then you get things that get more complex with it. With Peacemaker, of hey, what if this guy whose life was just complete shit got a window into a universe where everything that he'd ever dreamed of kind of came true, and that guy's life is still a piece of shit. Because, we're slowly getting reveals, and I know Alfie doesn't care because he's not a gun fan, so he probably won't watch it, but, spoilers for Peacemaker Season 2. We just got the Episode 3 just dropped a couple days ago as of recording, and like we get the revelation that like the Peacemaker from that universe is like addicted to pills and alcohol and stuff, and like fucking wrecked his own happy ending with Hargrove. I can never remember if I'm saying her name right. Harcourt, yeah, Harcourt. Like, so he's fucked his own life up, but it doesn't really matter because bro's dead. But it's just like, it's so fucking fascinating. Like, what would that mean to a person? Because I think there's something fundamentally human, right? Of just staying up late at night and thinking about that thing that you just desperately regret and you wish you could just open a door to, go back and fix. And like imagining how much different your life would be if you changed that one moment, right? And so to have Peacemaker like being the exploration of that, but literalized in a very comic book way, is just really, really fucking cool. So yeah, there's Deep, and then there's the evil versions of us, because I don't know if it started with that, but that's certainly like probably the earliest, most iconic example is like the evil Star Trek universe. With the
Mirror Universe.
Yeah, with the beards.
Evil goatee Spock.
One of my favorite versions of that, while still on the comic book part, is I've always really loved how the Flash handled Earth 2 with Jay Garrick. I really, really like the idea of you read about a comic book superhero and then you go to a world where all that happened and all the things, and the comic book is like someone's imagination is harnessing memories from a different world and they're putting it onto it as like the creativity is showing a glimpse into a different world. And Morrison did a lot of that with Multiversity, where they were using comic books to kind of solve the threat and like work out where they were being attacked from by seeing like what the writers and artists were putting down. And I just really like the idea of like Barry as a character meeting his childhood hero he thought was a fictional construct, and he's also awesome, and he's like, oh my god, like there's like a really like pure wish fulfillment aspect to that. And then you can do some deeper stuff where you realize like, oh, this is a real person, and you can kind of use that as an allegory for the writers who created these stories. You grew up as a kid were real people and they had their own hang-ups and they had their own problems and flaws, and now as you become an adult you realize that, and like how do you wrestle with that and how do you come to terms with it in your own stuff. Like all of that stuff I think is really interesting. I like the Earth-3 evil villain stuff as well. I like when they do it in more interesting ways than it just being like a direct this the same guy be evil. Like I really appreciate that they, for like Superman for example, when they do Ultraman, they reverse it so he's like a coward and he's like a pervert and he's just like got no noble traits whatsoever. Like he's getting cooked by Owlman. He can't like commit to anything. Like he's just a fucking loser. Like I think that's a cool idea because it's not Superman but evil. It's just it's everything turned inward. It's every aspect of that turned completely toxic, and I think that's a really, really interesting idea when you use it to highlight the roads not taken and kind of make you reevaluate the previous characters that you were dealing with. So like I agree as well. The modern influx of it, especially in like live action, like when the live action guys felt confident enough to now start spamming the multiverse, it feels like we stepped too far into the nerd gaze. Is like we should have stayed bullied for mentioning multiverse. This shouldn't have become such a mainstream topic. Because the moment the suits got a hold of it, they didn't view it as a storytelling device, because they never view it as a storytelling device. They view it as a way to reintroduce former IP or former projects that didn't get the love they needed at the time. But due to the fact that people are older now and they remember them, they'll get more praise just for inherently existing, no matter what the quality of them was. And we had a previous Geeky Gentleman episode kind of about like the nostalgia thing on it, so I don't think we should spend too much on that. But like, there's a big difference between kind of like the more positive version of that, where you're dealing with like fictional constructs meeting reality with like the Barry Allen thing, versus, oh, I remember this was a thing that existed, and now we have a canonical reason for that. It's part of the great MCU or part of the great cinematic universe, and that is good. And so, like, I remember Peacemaker, like you say, I'm not going to watch it, but in its defense, I'm really glad it took that direction instead of what every single person on Twitter thought it was going to do and be like, oh, this is how he connects to the old DCU. He goes to the new one, and now he's going to have Henry Cavill over here and David Cor. I was like, fuck you, man. Like, I'm so glad it wasn't that shit. We just made it an actual story. So I'll give it props for that front.
Yeah, like as much as this kind of connects in two ways to what you're talking about there with the Flash probably being like the most egregious example, because like Steve and I still have disagreements about No Way Home. I think I was just in a very particular place when I watched that, because I like watched all the Spider-Man movies leading up to it, because I was really excited for it, and so it felt like a bigger swing, especially being like the first one of those mainstream ones to do it and bring in all the old actors and stuff. Felt really cool in a way that hasn't felt as genuine since. So I was like more okay with No Way Home than that. But like you compare it to something like The Flash and its quote unquote cameos, deep fake bullshit, that just feels like so disingenuous to the point of being like insulting. But at the same time, I quite like that the only legacy of that film is going to be, yeah, and this is how the universe resets. So just, George Clooney showing up to be Batman at the end proves that, like, there have been, the quote-unquote time ripples from Barry Allen doing his Flashpoint shit. And that's the only thing we're keeping from that movie, is just that's our justification for why we're in a new universe now. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, Flash is interesting for a lot of really bad reasons, because it's just such a bad movie. But it's interesting because I feel like the outgrowth of all of these Easter egg-driven multiverse stories parallels really neatly with the expansion of stuff like generative AI, and they meet in the middle perfectly with the Flash movie, but also other stuff like the new Karate Kid movie and Cobra Kai. And a thing that I've been reading a lot about and wanting to write about is like how this idea of content at all costs, Easter eggs at all costs, recycling the same old thing over and over again just because you've seen it over and over again, that logic that invades all these multiverse stories is also exactly the logic of how generative AI works and why these two things are on similar tracks with each other. Because if your whole cultural philosophy is repeat the same thing over and over and over again with no artistic voice, then what better thing than the machine designed to repeat the same thing over and over and over again, but with no artistic voice? And like in that way, the Flash using generative AI to revive a bunch of actors and deep fake over a bunch of people in its finale is kind of the perfect statement on that, because the whole principle of that movie is also just the whole principle of that technology, and that's why they're perfect matches for each other. And that's also why the idea that Cobra Kai used deepfake tech to revive Mr. Miyagi in a terrible, terrible move, then spit out a movie that is nothing but that sort of formulaic bullshit over and over and over again, to the point where it doesn't even really feel like a movie anymore. So that window of it is a big problem. And I think, jumping back over to the good side of it, when you're watching something like Peacemaker, the fact that it's a multiverse story almost sort of feels like something you forget in the middle of watching it, or something that you almost feel is hard to put in conversation with this other stuff. Because the way we've used the multiverse visually in all of these crappy Marvel movies, where or in DC movies, like where the Flash is in this CGI zone where he's just gazing lovingly at all of these other screens while you are all looking at another screen, or Loki where he's just in the room with the TVA and they've got all these monitors looking at all these characters, like this sort of like infinite loop of images. Peacemaker doesn't do that. Peacemaker very clearly is just like, it's like you said, Ian, it's that idea of you just wish what if, and you then manifest that, and that is the story. Joss Whedon has this really good line in something he said before, where he's like, everyone's always kind of caught up in that Robert Frost poem about the road not taken. Like there's always this idea that no matter which road you pick, your mind's always going to be wondering about that other road. And being satisfied isn't finding out what happens on that other road. It's accepting the fact that you're always going to wonder, because that's part of being human. That's kind of the anchor of Captain America's arc in Age of Ultron, and why all the Captain America movies since then just don't work for me, because the whole point of Age of Ultron is you had another life. You could have had another life if you made another choice, and you just didn't get it, and you just have to move on. That's what life is about. But you kind of refuse all that when you start introducing multiverses, when it becomes this crutch of, I don't have to face the consequences of a choice I've made, because here is the other version that coexists where I didn't make that choice, and we treat these two things as interchangeable or identical. A big problem with the Flash movie that I had was nobody cared in making that movie who Michael Keaton's Batman was or who Ben Affleck's Batman was. They didn't care about the different identities of those characters, because functionally for the story, they wrote them as the same guy, just played by different actors. And if you're going to do that, what's even the point of bringing the actor back?
No, but you don't understand, Steve. See, Michael Keaton Batman said, "Let's get nuts." And Ben Affleck Batman didn't say that. And then George Clooney Batman just said, "Hi, I'm George Clooney Batman. Remember that movie that everyone hated?" Pretty sure that was his line.
I'm pretty sure that's what he said. Yeah, that sounds like the end of that movie.
I remember it.
But yeah, it's kind of funny for George Clooney to be in two movies that are just like universally hated on release.
The end of eras.
Really is.
He's the franchise killer.
The craziest fucking move they could ever make is if they do a fucking live action Crisis on Infinite Earths and they cast George Clooney as fucking Pariah. He just appears as like, oh, he's the sign that the fucking anti-monitor is about to hit. You know, though, you mean if they did a second live-action Crisis on Infinite Earths? Oh, yeah, that's true.
I never saw that. I'd completely given up on the Arrowverse by the time they got around to doing that.
It's not great.
Brandon Routh is cute in it. That's all you need to. That's everything else is.
Brandon Routh is good, and then the rest is kind of awful. I don't know. I kind of dug Oliver's thing at the end where he's like, "You have failed this universe." That's pretty cool.
You're fucking deep in the trenches. Like you poured a lot out for Arrow, so that meant a lot to you to finally.
I was deep in on Arrow for a very, very long time, but.
And you hated every second of it after season 1. So I don't know.
He put in the time. Yeah.
I didn't, though. I thought the first 2.5 seasons of Arrow I legitimately like and think are pretty good. But that's beside the point. But no, to the multiverse point, the contrast between like the Flash and the Peacemaker approach of it, those aren't like the only two ways to do it, but they are definitely delineating like the version of it that comes from a person that has a story to tell versus the version that comes from somebody who doesn't have a story to tell, where there is no sort of point of view. And when I think about like the best scenes in The Flash, or the things that people point to as like, this was so epic in The Flash, it's always these like ethereal, non-character driven, just, but look, candy, but look, shiny thing I remember. And then you contrast that to like Peacemaker, and like, when I think of the best scenes in that show, I think of like in episode 2 when he's just sitting in the library in the Ultimate Universe alone, crying because he realized he got his perfect life here. Like, there's weight to that compared to just like, look, Easter egg. And to that show's credit, they haven't really done any cameo Easter eggs outside of Rick Flag. And even then, that's like a part of his character. That's not just look actor. That's like, look at the face of the guy you regret killing. How do you confront that? Like, it's so much deeper than just the cameo fest.
Yeah, I mean, like, you get the little bit with Green Lantern and Hawkgirl in episode 1, and I messaged, I think Alfie talking about this, about just, like, how that feels really good to see, especially in your premiere episode, to compare it to something like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where, like, they got Nick Fury and, what's her name, Robin from How I Met Your Mother. They got them in
Maria
that...
Hill, yeah.
Yeah, they got them in that show eventually. Nick Fury was at the end of season 1, but, like, Mano still had the best take on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for me, where he's like, so I used to watch this TV show when I was growing up, and I had all the toys, and so I would, after the TV show was over, I would play with the toys and, like, have my own adventures. And then I'd watch the show again when the new episode came out, and I'd be annoyed because they were, like, contradicting my adventures, and that's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Just, like, the level of detachment that like a lot of the MCU projects had, to the point where, like, yay, Daredevil's canon now. I'm like, that was the whole thing the fucking Netflix shows were based on, is that they were going to be canon to the MCU. What are you talking about? Compared to, like, Peacemaker's like, yeah, here's the, that Superman movie that just came out. This is the next project coming out right after that. There's Nathan Fillion in it. There's Rick Flag Sr. being played by the same guy that voiced him in Creature Commandos, the project right before Superman, and he was in Superman in a small role. So just, like, it makes it all feel a lot more cohesive, and I think it's a really smart choice to, like, use smaller actors, which goes back to the multiverse thing of not depending on the cameo.
And if you want to have your cake and eat it too, it's not just immediately canon to, it's canon to two things. they doubled up. It's canon to two different DC universes. So they fucking solidified that shit as a fucking constant.
So I don't know, I think that's, Peacemaker is just a really fucking good show, at least so far. God, if he fucking bungles that, then I have no hope left, because you can't start out that strong and then end up sucking. That would be so disappointing.
Slightly different track, because I started by being lukewarm on it, but I do want to talk about the merit of it for a second. But more than a couple years, I guess now, but that movie with Michelle Yeoh, Everything Everywhere All at Once, the movie that came out, like, early in the year and then ended up sweeping the Oscars and winning Best Picture, and it's just a goofy sci-fi action movie about a woman realizing that she exists in multiple universes and that her daughter is trying to collapse the multiverse, and being about their relationship and what about her life that she regrets and the other path that she could have taken and whether or not all that works. It's a good movie. I don't love it the way some people do, but it's a good movie, and in part because it really understands that fundamental question of, like, if you could see yourself in another life, is that a blessing or is that a curse? There's a really good bit in it where, like, they travel to the universe where, like, she's a famous actress, and she sees her husband in the regular life, who's not married to her here, and they have a conversation. And in, like, the regular universe, they're immigrants, they run a laundromat, they owe a bunch of money to the IRS, they're just, like, constantly underwater and they're not happy. And then she gets to peek into this other universe, and she sees her husband again, and he says to her after she, like, explains this stuff, he would have been happy just working at a laundromat with her for the rest of his life, because it's not always greener on the other side. And it really hits, because it makes you realize everything that you're doing that you feel like doesn't amount to anything, you're still doing it with people that you care about and people that you love. And anytime you decide to make this choice that would have branched you somewhere else, that's also foreclosing the idea that the people you care about right now would still be there for you, because you've gone down a completely different path at that point. And so how can you really wish to live in another universe when there's so much about what makes you you that wouldn't exist without the people around you? And I really like that part of that movie, and that's the kind of stuff in the multiverse that I really love. Spider-Verse is another good example of that, where, like, Spider-Verse is so much about what does Miles need in himself and in his world that he's taking the lessons from by seeing these other universes.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like with Spider. Go ahead, Ian, if you got something to say.
It's about Spider-Man, Alfie. I'm never going to hold you back from talking about Spider-Man.
Thank you. Glad we understand each other. What I really appreciate with Spider-Verse as well is how they kind of do the two-pronged thing, where that character for the longest time has always had like a bit of an inherent like irony with being the most popular superhero in the world almost since his inception, and staying that way pretty definitively, despite how much Batman will try to usurp it. And then the fact that in universe and in kind of the core of the stories, he has to be a penniless underdog loser who the world kind of despises or hates or just kind of indifferent to, finds him annoying. So the fact that Spider-Verse could take kind of that meta element but still form it in a very deeply place with Peter, where he gets to have the Spider-Man that's kind of what the cinematic version of Spider-Man had been for so many people and what the audience kind of like genuinely wants Spider-Man to be, where he's like doing all the movies you've seen and he's hyper competent and he's fighting all the villains and he's doing great jokes and he's got fucking Chris Pine doing the voice and stuff like that, and like he's just kind of like the ultimate Spider-Man, but he's still very distinctly like tired of everything still, and he still feels like himself. And then we get to the main Peter, who's the version from the comics, or the version that we see more, and kind of like he can't live up to that vision of himself that didn't really exist, and he doesn't know how to apply that to Miles. And then it all linking back to Miles, who kind of has to decide that, oh, this idea of Spider-Man that I was so worried of being doesn't really exist. It's just how these people have actualized themselves to do what they think is right and to help the people they love and to try and make up for mistakes from their past. And when he has that leap of faith moment and he surpasses Peter and he gets to be the guy he saw at the start doing like the same tricks, that they mirror the movements in the animation, he gets to be that platonic deal. I think it's just such a great mix of different moments and using kind of because a lot of people shy from like the cultural nature of the character, and I agree a lot of the time that can get really old, not just for Spider-Man but for anyone in general, when like people make like movies about the character instead of being about something else. But I think that is still a powerful element in like audience expectation and kind of audience I guess just like what the baggage they bring into something, that if you understand how to use that in addition to making something about real human emotions.
Oh no.
Why you're making a Spider-Man story instead of anyone else's, for example. So all of that stuff I think is phenomenal, and I think it's really, really, really strong writing.
Okay. Steve, did he cut out for just like a hot second for you two, or was it just on my end?
No, not for me.
Okay, I must have dropped out of the call for just like 2 seconds. I literally only missed like 2 words, I think, but it was just...
Alright, good. Alright.
Yeah. No, I really agree. Spider-Verse is such a great movie. I feel like I'm the only one in the world who actually really loves the sequel. But I don't know if that's neither here nor there. I thought it was just interesting to take sequel... a lot of those same emotions present in the first film and like compound onto it and like start to put Miles like, okay, so are you good enough to be part of like what this character means if we throw the whole of Spider-Man, not just a couple of like ideas of here's like the idealized movie Spider-Man and here's the, you know, schlub comic book Spider-Man, but like here is all of Spider-Man. Do you measure up against Miles? Is such a cool idea to me.
The third one could save the second one for me. It could boost it up a lot.
Yeah, I mean, my big problem with Across the Spider-Verse is just like it stops. It doesn't end. It just stops. It doesn't have like a proper denouement moment where the movie has a finale and then we wait for the next part. It just literally stops. And that's a major problem for me, because even when you do a lot of movies that are part 1, part 2s, they can still have endings. Like Dune Part 1 has an ending. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 has an ending. It's still a Part 1, but there's still an ending. Spider-Verse, I feel like, literally is just like all of this rising action and then stop. And it's so jarring that it bothers me. But everything up to that point I do really like. I think Spider-Verse, the second Spider-Verse, is a good companion piece to this conversation, because it kind of feels like 2 bookended moments where, because of the success of Into the Spider-Verse, everyone started doing multiverse stuff. And then when everyone started doing multiverse stuff, it all became about the universal importance of the characters, and about cameos, and about Easter eggs, and about the things the MCU's been doing with like a sacred timeline and anchor beings, and anchor beings in Deadpool and Wolverine, I feel like, is like the least superhero idea of all time. Like, it just seems like you're cutting against the grain of like what makes Marvel characters interesting fundamentally by saying that there are anchor beings that are anchoring the whole universe. Like, that's just not a Marvel idea. But that all of that then gets responded to in a sequel to Spider-Verse that like sees all this happening. And then Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse becomes all about this idea of canon and canon events and this idea of a sacred timeline. All of that is bullshit. All of that is imposed onto these people. No one has to live this way. But there is this fear that if things don't harmonize in this way, that it's bad for ambiguous reasons. And so the fact that Miles is fighting for his place as who he is against a wave of people that believe in canon and believe in sacred timelines and believe in the importance of like Doctor Who style fixed moments that are all just ultimately arbitrary feels like a really good response to those things. Like, you could watch Across the Spider-Verse and Deadpool and Wolverine and be like, okay, the Spider-Verse is very clearly, even though it couldn't have in production, it's a movie that really feels like it's clearly responding to everything that Deadpool and Wolverine does in terms of the multiverse and why that's a bad formula for it.
Yeah, and my thing with that as well is I feel like it kind of segues into another one I want to talk about. If we're just talking about like our favorite stories that use the multiverse as a device, is the whole anchor being concept and the idea of like, oh, if it goes, the multiverse goes down and we get like an incursion and stuff like that. It's their take on like the Hickman Avengers big Secret Wars event lead up stuff, but like completely missing the point. Like the whole idea, and what I really like about how Hickman uses it, why it's my favorite multiverse story of all time, is it's like you guys have been talking about before. It's like the world, the road left untaken, like the thing you didn't do, but it's expanded to the idea of it's kind of like a survival horror put to the biggest stage possible, where it's just like, okay, you are given an impossible problem. The universe is dying early. Worlds are crashing into each other and destroying everything one by one by one. And it's getting like exponentially quicker every single time one of these things dies. So Reed Richards and the other Marvel superheroes and the Illuminati world, and they're trying to stop this. And the whole story is basically about, all right, you have this gate that lets you see what the other versions of you have done against this. And the ones that kept their morals died, and the ones that didn't lived a little longer, but they still died. What are you going to do? And how long are you going to try to keep this? And can you be a good man in this situation? And what are the kind of burdens that these people force on themselves instead of, because they think they're the only ones who can handle it? And it's like, good kind of like immediate, like having characters bash their head against the wall against an impossible problem and seeing how long it takes for them to break. And that going over using the multiverse, I think, is a really cool idea, because it's one of the few devices where the scale, despite being as big as possible you could get in fiction, still remains ultimately personal, because you're seeing versions of your own family. Like, it's not just nameless. It could be set in the universe, right? It didn't have to be a multiverse. It could just be the universe is falling and like actual planets are colliding. And like, while it would still be sad, once you get numbers that big from like Alien Race number 7, it's kind of like the problem where like it's so big it doesn't mean anything anymore. Mm-hmm. I know we talk about a lot of that. Yeah, that's a tendency I fall into sometimes. But the idea of you getting to see your own family and versions of yourselves that made all the right choices, that tried the things you're thinking of, and it wasn't enough, and you don't know what to do now, and you have to keep trying. Really, really, really strong. And the problem with the Marvel version of it with the MCU is they completely missed that idea of people making human choices and human sacrifices to make it about, oh, we recognize this character is popular, this character was the one that appeared in the most movies, they're the most important. And, like, that's it. That's all it comes down to. There's no thematic reason for Tom Holland to be the MCU anchor point for that universe. There's no reason for Hugh Jackman to be the MCU anchor point of the universe or Deadpool or whatever. Like, they're just there to get the fact that, oh, they're the popular ones. That's all it is. That's all it comes down to, and it makes me so mad.
It also just, like, undercuts the idea of what makes Spider-Man interesting as a concept. Like what you were talking about before of, like, he's the ultimate underdog. The idea of Spider-Man is that everything goes wrong for this dude all the time, and he perseveres through it. The best moment in Homecoming, when he's got, like, the two boats being pulled by the webbing, or the moment in the comics where, like, he's pinned down by the piping underwater and he has to lift it up. Like, so much of what makes Spider-Man interesting is that he's, one, not good at his job, two, no one really likes him, and three, he's often not equipped to handle the things he's fighting, but he does it anyway. And the moment you turn that into cosmic significance, it feels like it loses that touch of, like, the fundamentally Marvel thing of heroes that are burdened with responsibility, not heroes that embrace it necessarily. And the Hickman thing is interesting too, because part of what makes Hickman's Avengers run and then leading into the Secret Wars stuff so interesting is Hickman's kind of foundational turning point for the Avengers is they're always the two patriarchs of it, Tony and Steve, are always arguing about the best way to do things, and in the process of doing of that argument, mistakes happen or things go wrong. But the one mistake that they never really overcome, that they have to learn as they get through Secret Wars, is maybe this idea that we have for the Avengers, this idea of we could do this, or you could do that, or you could do that, or you could do that. Maybe the problem is you don't need it to begin with. Hickman does a really good job of interrogating the idea of the Avengers don't have to exist. We choose to let them exist for a reason, but they don't have to. So what does it mean to let that go? And what does it mean to make the choice to do it, regardless of what the consequences of that choice are? So all that to say, like, when the multiverse becomes this thing where where there's cosmic significance associated with these things, rather than this sort of more human idea of the person against the infinite, it just feels a lot less interesting, because one is about the character and the other is about the audience, and these two things just don't always reconcile.
So you've brought up this like a couple times now, and I want to hop on it before we go too far away from it again. And that's just like with the idea of the multiverse, I've always, as much as I'm a DC guy, and you know this, I've always really appreciated for Marvel Comics that it's just Earth 616, right? Which just, like, it's not a cool number, right? It's not like the bad number. It's not like number one or like something of significance. It's just there's that many, and there's clearly more, is what you get the impression when you take that number, right? Whereas, like, DC is always revolved around, like, Earth Prime or, like, Earth 1 or whatever. It's like, this is the most important Earth, and that's the one we're following in the comics all the time. And I've always been like, yeah, that's fine. It doesn't really matter, because obviously we're not going to, like, long-term follow any of these other Earths. But, and this is a big but, I fucking love, and maybe that's just my little nihilistic ass, I fucking love just the idea of, like, no, the hero you're following from your universe, they're really not that important because of just how big a universe is, much less a multiverse. There's something so much more interesting to me that it's just the struggles, the humanity, the getting up and fighting every day to save the world or whatever your comic book hero is doing is just a drop in an infinite ocean. And like that's, and some people kind of like, I think some people react to that in a similar way that they do to quote unquote something's canon or something's in an alternate universe, and like they think it doesn't matter if it's not quote unquote canon, because then it just means less. And like, no, that's what makes it mean more. The fact that it's so insignificant but it still hits. The fact that like it doesn't have to be the most super special in the multiverse that we made up to still be important to you. Like that connection of making something insignificant in like an objective sense, but making it still so impactful in like a truly humanist sense is just so much more important to me than this one gets the important number.
This is going to sound really stupid, but I promise I feel like it is kind of related. But something about that exact point that you made, that's always resonated with me with Marvel stuff too, but it also resonated with me when you think about how the Grinch stole Christmas, because the whole idea of the Grinch and the Who's is that the story is from the perspective of them, but they are a society that lives on the tip of a snowflake, and that snowflake, everything's just really microscopic, and that snowflake is eventually just going to fall and get crushed. There's something about that framing of it, of everything that you're seeing about Christmas and the Who's and the Grinch's heart and all of this is deeply moving and affecting and matters, but it's all framed around a metaphor for everything's just racing towards entropy. Because at the end of it, it's just another snowflake in the vast sea of snowflakes. You're right. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the thing that I think takes that concept to its just absolute absurdist end would be something like Rick and Morty.
Which was
exactly huge a couple of years back and has like fallen off, and the creators got into a bunch of bullshit, and I don't really want to talk about all that. I just like the existential dread of the multiverse that Rick and Morty dealt with, and in particular the way they closed out one of the seasons with the universe they were in got just completely fucked, so they just go to another universe that's identical to their own in almost every way.
And then they
kill their counterparts
in the backyard.
Bury the bodies in the backyard. And it's like, it's treated as like, man, that's super fucked up. And then like, they're just never going to address it again, clearly. And then the next season, near the end, he's like, that's my body in the backyard. I'm not actually your brother. It's like, oh shit. That's so fucked.
That's one of the things that's really cool about the idea of all of these things coexisting, is that it does kind of bring into this question of like the cosmic significance of what you're doing. And when you verbalize that in like superhero conflicts or superhero fights, then you have like this really potent dramatic formula to just say characters that know that in the grand scheme they don't need faith in the idea that things are pointless. They can see it. They experience the idea that all of this is futile at all times because they're always doing multiversal bullshit. Yet they still kind of continue on their day-to-day lives as if that doesn't exist, because dwelling on that doesn't actually solve anything. It's just kind of the nature of things. All of this also kind of like, it gives you less respect for the MCU, because one of the things that they did that really bothered me in recent years is Kevin Feige said something about the MCU being Universe 616.
Mm-hmm.
And when he said that, I'm like, okay, clearly you don't understand why there was a multiverse or why the Marvel Comics universe is 616. The whole point of naming the Marvel Comics universe 616 is so that anything else you do that isn't in the comics can just be a different number Marvel universe. It's not a cool reference to the comics to say your movies are 616. That's just you saying that you are now 616 and they are something else.
You know
It's
what?
so
No.
stupid.
Here's how you fix that, Steve. You ready? You ready for this? Just
Yeah.
canonically now, every alternate universe in Marvel that we visit, they all just name their universe 616 because no one wants to be like so bold as to claim universe number 1. So they just all collectively come up with 616.
All of them are just 616. Yeah, every universe figures out they're in a multiverse, and they all just happen to pick 616.
It reminds me, there's a really
Brilliant.
funny gag about that in the JLA Avengers from Kurt Busiek near the end of it, where the Justice League and the Avengers like team up at the end, and then like Wasp goes like, "All right, well, we'll see you guys from Earth 2 another time," and then Iron Man's just like. Sorry, not Iron Man. Green Arrow's like, Earth 2? What are you talking about? We called you guys as Earth 617. Like, I don't know what you're talking. It's like, they just both have like a kind of like a subtweet argument about no, I'm this number, you're that number. And they keep kind of going back and forth. And it was really, really funny little cute bit.
I like because
I will-
Futurama did a bit like that too, where it's like, all right, we'll be Universe A and you'll be Universe B. No, we don't want to be Universe B. Okay, fine. We'll be Universe A and you'll be Universe 1. Got it. Cool.
Yeah, that's really funny.
Oh man.
The thing I wanted to say on the, because we talked about like Ian, you talked about like why 616 is a really good number in comparison to DC. One thing I did like about DC that really feels like a bygone era now. After the new 52, and we've gone back to like the old school, like big, huge, infinite multiverse, is I really did like the idea that all the 52 Earths had like a specific thing and were already pretty fleshed out, and like each Earth corresponded to a specific thing. Like it wasn't just an infinite amount of things that like here's this what if. It was like a more like kind of cohesive, like this is specifically this. I like having the excuse for the infinite thing because it's just opens more avenues for stories. It's just not as limiting. But I do think that is a cool aspect to being like, all right, this is the Earth that is all pulp heroes, and this is the pulp hero Earth. This is the Earth that's all the vampire stuff. This is the Marvel stand-in Earth. This is, and they all serve very specific notions, and they weren't just versions of the main DC universe that they felt like more like alternative realities instead of like alt timelines, I guess is the thing, where a lot of multiverse stuff feels like it's just a different timeline instead of being like a fundamentally different universe. And I think that's a cool vibe as well when we lead into that.
Yeah, my kind of like way to circle or square that circle has always been that there are 52 Earths, but each of them have like their own split off of alternate timelines and shit that are going on within them. So that's how you can
That makes
get,
a lot
like,
of sense, yeah.
this what if fits into this Earth's, alternate timeline, because we still get alternate timelines from the main Earth, so there's no reason to say that shouldn't be the case for the other Earths as well. It's always been like my way to kind of square that circle.
That also kind of reminds me of like the distinction between just having an alternate universe and having a multiverse story, because there's the ultimate universe, of course, and then there's like the absolute universe now, and then there's like Marvel 1608, and like there's all these other like Elseworld style things. So like you've got the Elseworld story where Batman's a vampire, and that's got all of its stories and all of its universal stuff that happens. But the thing about a multiverse is like it always has to come from that editorial standpoint of how can we justify that we've got all these different canons going on at the same time. Boom, got it. Multiverse. They're all connected. So whatever the main universe is can just have some sort of moment or story or arc that acknowledges the existence of these other things so that they can all be threaded together. Because we want to ideally keep publishing these alternate stories, but we have to find some way to connect it all brand-wise. And that's part of the reason that like I feel Multiverse is always starting with like its arms tied behind his back, because it's such a cynical idea. Like you can't just publish stories where Batman's a vampire. You can't just do like Dark Knight Returns. You can't just do like Speeding Bullets. You gotta come up with some sort of bullshit universe reason for why these are all happening inside of a multiverse. Because that's kind of the thing about it is like there are cool stories where characters experience multiple realities. We've talked about a bunch of them. But the concept of a multiverse inherently, independently of that, has a really hard time justifying itself because it seems kind of useless. Why does DC need a multiverse when you can just publish a bunch of alternate universe stories? Outside of the fact that you can just use the idea of a multiverse in a specific story for story reasons. And that's kind of where we lose the thread, I feel like. And this is like the difference between... I'll just keep using Peacemaker because I love Peacemaker. This is like the difference between Peacemaker and like Metal and Death Metal and all the bullshit Scott Snyder and Joshua Williamson have been doing for years at DC. These are just like shitty lore books. These are all just like DC cosmology that means nothing, where there's no story value whatsoever. You're just trying to like find some way to distill down this weird editorial desire to say that a multiverse exists, but you're not actually doing any storytelling.
Yeah, I remember, and like Alfie's tired of hearing me talk about it at this point, but I just remember, like, this is years after I stopped reading Scott Snyder on principle, and then someone posted one of the fucking pages from the first Metal book or whatever, where they literally took like the map of the multiverse that Morrison made in Multiversity. They're like, and then if we flip it, there's a dark multiverse. So it was like, come the fuck on.
That's so stupid. I fucking hate Scott Snyder comics, man.
It was like, Scott Snyder is like, literally, Scott Snyder told me, I'm actually friends with Morrison. I don't think I steal anything from him, and he's never said anything like that to me. And I'm like, he's probably just really fucking polite. I'm sorry, Scott. Literally, what if we just take Morrison's concept and flip it over?
And this is like... This is why I can't read a lot of like modern DC stuff anymore, because I feel like it's all just like this. It's all just like every book is leading up to a story about the multiverse that's trying to give you some sort of cosmological reason for why the universe is this way, but like the story isn't actually happening, or there's no actual like artistic voice or interesting thing going on. It's all just recycling the same crisis event things over and over and over and over again, to the point of it just being incoherent. Like, you can do Peacemakers, you can do Spider-Verses, you can do stories where a character experiences the idea of a multiverse as like the thematic crux of something larger. But when you're doing a multiverse just for the sake of itself, it becomes inherently uninteresting, I feel like. Like, the idea that, like, imagine if someone was like, I own the estate of Cormac McCarthy novels, and I am reading every Cormac McCarthy novel. Isn't it weird that this man named Cormac McCarthy wrote 2 different novels with 2 different events happening? I got it. Let's do a sequel to Blood Meridian that's all about how all of Cormac McCarthy's novels are part of a multiverse, and they're all connected into separate Earths. And then we can just continue down this one trilogy of books where they're all experiencing the multiverse. It's like the dumbest thing ever in any other context, but DC just makes a living out of it at this point.
I mean, it's also funny to think about, like, Stephen King's Dark Tower.
Yep, exactly.
Like, I've just written so many books that I'm going to do a book series that just whenever I want to, I can jump back into the world of my other books. And I'm like, okay. And like, that's the one that's like super popular with people for some reason. I'm 2 books into the Dark Tower series. One of them's, which is not even like labeled as such. I'm just like reading it and going, wait, is this part of fucking Dark Tower? It doesn't say anywhere on the fucking book, but this feels like it's Dark Tower. What the hell?
And like, at least with Stephen King, because I don't love the Dark Tower books, but like at least with Stephen King, you've got this sort of built-in conceit of like, okay, at least it's the guy who wrote all the books going back and revisiting his own ideas from like a more critical perspective in certain ways. Like Wizard and Glass kind of has more of that sort of like self-critical element to it. And then something like The Gunslinger feels very much like this is not the kind of story you're usually seeing from him, but then it kind of turns into that. So like he's able to play with his identity a little bit at the very least. But like, yeah, as those books go on, they just become this weird conceit to say that this guy can keep writing books about different things. And I'm just like, okay, why? Like, no one doubted that you could do that. Why do we need this?
I don't know.
It's so weird to me. It's just a weird concept. And it's only in comics does it feel like it becomes this weird sort of like central thing that we have to justify all the time for no reason.
I think it's just because, like, the genie kind of left the bottle at one point with, you know, rebooting characters like The Flash and Green Lantern for DC. Mm-hmm. And then once you kind of establish an idea in comics, and this is with everything. Like, you see it in film and comics the most. You see it in novels and stuff. Like, Twilight came out, so suddenly everyone had to make sexy vampire novels and shit, which... You know, that it existed beforehand, but Twilight gave that, like, such a huge resurgence. And fucking, you know, DC does a multiverse thing to try to explain away their continuity fuck-ups, and suddenly everyone's gotta do a multiverse thing. A movie comes out, and suddenly we get, like, 3 versions of the same movie. Die Hard at the White House 3. Or it just seems like in the creative field, and I'm not sure if this is communist time, I'm not sure if this is just purely a reaction of the capitalist class of, like, trying to, you know, move in and, like, get in on a market that's really hot right now, and that's just how it's expressing itself in the form of creative media, or if it's just, like, a fundamental, like, human thing. Because, like, we talked about this years ago at this point, of, like, Hercules, the myth of Hercules, is so weird because he kills his family, and in order to atone for it, he has to do all these great labors. And then he has a new family and kills them again, and in order to atone for it, he has to do all these great labors. And that happens like 3 more times, and that's how you get to the 12 labors of Hercules. It felt like that was the conceit for, like, one of the things, and then they're just like, oh, and then he did these 3 labors to make up for it. And then no one could decide, like, which labor was which, so they just kept adding to the continuity of Hercules. And just kept giving him families to murder.
And I mean, to your point, like, there are these moments where it seems like culturally we've all kind of overlapped and do the same thing. Like the 2 White House movies coming out in the same year, Failsafe and Doctor Strangelove coming out right next to each other. Like, certain ideas are in the air and a lot of people fear them and they express them differently. But I think that's fundamentally different than looking at a thing that was successful and trying to reverse engineer it. Because if 2 people are on the same track of, I'm going to make a movie about Cold War anxiety and it's going to be a satire, I'm going to make a movie about Cold War anxiety and it's going to be a thriller, those are 2 independent thoughts that just kind of happen concurrently. With something like No Way Home and Spider-Verse, I think there is a very conscious effort of Spider-Verse was successful. It was a Oscar award-winning movie. It was one of the most well-regarded animated movies of all time. People saw that and they wanted to reverse engineer it, and they did it several times in different ways, and that output was stagnated because you had to actually produce these things in a way that's different when these 2 things are like on a parallel course. With DC, though, like, DC wanted intentionally to simplify their line, so Crisis on Infinite Earths was born. And there's a lot of books and interviews about, like, the different origins, the different arguments about Crisis on Infinite Earths. But at the end of the day, the whole idea was we need to simplify things and we need to create sort of like a central point where we can start fresh again. And that's why Crisis had to happen. And then after that, you actually had a really stable post-Crisis timeline for a really long period of time. Like, you had other Crisis events. You had Zero Hour. You had Infinite Crisis. Like, but even so, there was like a good 20, 30 years where we were just in this timeline. The reason we did it again with the New 52 is because of waning sales and the fact that what Dan Didio talks about how the movie industry side of it and the comic book side of it were two separate things, but one had to kind of get ahead of the other or else it was going to lead the other. And so when the movies became more successful than the comics had no choice but to be reactionary to the movies. So as the MCU was being born and no comic was selling very well in the late 2000s, Didio has a genuinely pretty smart idea of let's just manufacture a way to do this again and reset so we can invite new readership and get the cart before the horse again. And to their credit, it was successful again. But at that point, it becomes this thing where people are going to see it and try to reverse engineer it. Post New 52 is when Marvel finally starts doing things like crisis events and reboots and stuff. And then DC every couple of years starts doing this again because it becomes the sort of stimulant that they think will fix any period of waning sales. So New 52 starts to kind of like peter off. Okay, Rebirth. And then every couple of years just kind of goes through this same cycle over and over again because they're just reinventing the same idea because they thought it fixed the problem once, ignoring the fact that we did it for a very specific reason before. And to its credit, as much as the Crisis on Infinite Earths Arrowverse thing is not very good, they did have a reason for doing it. They did it for the exact same reason we did it in the comics, to streamline the timeline and sunset a bunch of stuff they didn't want to do anymore. So like there was kind of a thought behind it and why they decided to do it that way. But that's clearly not there by the time you're getting to Rebirth, and it's 100% not there when you're getting to like the fucking 3-part animated movie Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Oh god, that's so bad.
I know. It's terrible.
I almost watched it again because I recently finished Young Justice Phantoms. I'd been sitting on that for a long ass time. Finally got around to it. I'm like, oh yeah, because this this continued the Razor Aya story because you had Green Lantern animated series. Razor flies off to see if he can find Aya. You had Justice League Action, have Aya. Like this is the piece of her that's still left. And then you had Young Justice where we encountered like the other half of Razor's journey. And then I'm like, and have they finished that yet? I'm like, oh yeah, they did in Crisis on Infinite Earths. How'd that go again? And it's just, they just fucking show up together. You don't see them reunite. Like, well, that's garbage. What a fucking disappointment movie.
They're such bad movies. They're just abysmal to watch.
Yeah, no, it was like completely unintelligible because they're adapting the original Crisis like premise, but they're doing it for their movie universe, which hadn't even been around for that long. And so you're sitting there going, is this part of the New 52 movie line? Or is this, what is this? You just don't even know.
Yeah.
Because, like, they're doing it for the universe that started with, what was it, Man of Tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that was, 3 years ago. What are you doing right now?
And all of that just to kind of say, like, when the multiverse becomes the selling point as opposed to the multiverse just being part of the story, you know you've kind of lost the plot. Like, there's Dark Knight Returns, one of the greatest superhero comics of all time, and then there's Chip Zdarsky doing a story about Batman meeting DKR Batman. And that is, let me tell you, not one of the greatest superhero comics of all time. It's actually one of the worst. It's genuinely one of the worst. It's so bad.
No, tell me how you really feel.
I don't know who needs to hear this, but if someone in your life is considering reading the Chip Zdarsky run on Batman, you need to kill them, and you need to do it slow. It's really bad. I kid you not. Chip Zdarsky on Batman is what got me out of reading monthly superhero comics.
Which is so disappointing. I remember hearing you guys talk about it, and like you were so excited for him to come on, and then it just dropped the fucking ball or something. I don't know.
He dropped the ball with the back half of Daredevil, I think, and that's part of why we were really excited because Daredevil was really good, and then Daredevil started to suck, and we were like, oh, so this is the energy he's bringing into Batman. Okay.
Good thing about Batman comics is even if one of them sucks, there's probably a masterpiece like a month away max, so don't worry about it too bad. Like, we're still eating pretty fucking good with Batman comics right now. It's never a problem.
I wouldn't know. I have not read the current Batman in a minute.
Fraction Batman issue 1 was really good. Dark Patterns is really good. We just had the Ram V run, which you have read, which was fucking sick. So
Ram V run's good. I like Dark Patterns, yeah.
There's a lot of good Batman stuff still to be found.
Every word I've heard about the Matt Fraction Batman, I've read a lot of reviews of it, and every review is saying here's everything that's great about it, is immediately a red flag for me. I'm like, okay, I'm not reading this. I'm just gonna wait.
You're probably not gonna like it. Yeah. It's probably not your vibe.
So we'll see.
All right. Well, I think we touched a lot of bases here. I think we're pretty good on this one. It's a fun topic. It's timely. Certainly timely. So yeah, go watch Peacemaker, and hopefully it doesn't suddenly suck. That would be terrible.
That'd be a shame.
Steve, I messaged you about this, but I'm gonna throw it out there. I saw someone on online complaining about Peacemaker a little bit. They're like, "Man, this fucking alternate universe only got white people in it," and it gave me this thought. So I'm gonna put my prediction out there, just to see if it comes true. No, wait, what if that's the fucking ball drop twist? What if that's the fucking, oh my god, I'm in the racist universe and my life is perfect? What the fuck?
Which makes perfect sense because of his dad from the first season. It makes perfect sense. His
dad was a Klan member, and now his dad's all such a happy-go-lucky guy, and they're he's like, I love you, son, which his dad never would have said, and there's his life's all together, and everyone's parading him down the street as he's driving his motorcycle. It's what if the world where you're happy is the most fucked world you can imagine? Yeah.
I really can't wait to see how that goes. It's been such a good show.
Yeah, there's I might be hyping it up too much because that would be such a fucking masterful reveal, but I don't know. I was thinking back to Guardians 2 with, hey, it broke my heart to put that tumor in her head.
Right!
All right.
I definitely think that probably will happen from what I've seen from people. It seems like it's a pretty popular theory.
All right, cool. Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I am the champion of the oppressed.
And I am being oppressed by multiverses.
Nice. And we are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.